Hi, and welcome to Happiness TV. I'm your host, Barbie Tracy, and today I have with us Dr. Ray Levy. He is a child psychologist, and he specializes in children and adolescents that are especially difficult and have behavioral issues. So what we're going to talk about today is the 5 rules of parenting. Hi, Dr. Ray. Thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for being on the show. So we want to talk about the 5 basic rules of parenting today. And what you start with is just basically giving parents an idea of how to manage the whole parenting process and avoid some of the pitfalls. So the first step that you talk about is dealing with experience being the best teaching tool,
Yes.
and not lecturing. So can you talk a little bit about that for us, please?
Yes, and a little bit, Barbie. These are really not the 5 basic rules. These are sort of 5 more common mistakes, I would like maybe you would say, that I've seen over the 30-plus years that I've been doing therapy and with children, adolescents, and families. These are 5 basic pitfalls, basically,
Okay.
with parents. And one of the first one is that experience is the best teacher, not your lecturing and talking. And I see too many parents, and including myself, we do this. We think that we're going to install wisdom by talking to kids, by letting them know about our wonderful experience, and we really kind of try to deprive them of their experience because we don't want them to fall or make the same mistakes we do. But the problem is experience is by far the best teacher over anything. I mean, do you remember riding a bike? Do you remember learning how to ride a bike?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, I'm sure your parents could explain the physics of riding a bike and how if you're moving forward you're not going to fall over and all that kind of stuff, but that wouldn't have done it.
Right.
And then you also that's giving lecture, that's words, that's information. And then there is modeling, and we see other people ride a bike, and that's great, but that doesn't do it. And what does it, and what taught you how to ride a bike was getting on it, falling off, getting on it, falling off, getting on it, and then finally going, oh, I got it.
Uh-huh.
And once you had that experience, you had it. Now, you may have not have ridden a bike for, I don't know, 10 years, but I bet you could get on a bike right now and ride it.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So once you've learned it, then as long as you've organically learned it and you didn't learn it through somebody else or through the lectures,
Right.
then you can keep the knowledge and it stays with you. Is
Right.
that the thought process?
Yes, not just that, but that we not only learn it best, but it's the best type of learning, the most fun learning. We even get involved too much in kids' homework. We feel their homework's got to be all correct. Well, that's what the teacher's there for, to correct it. Now, if the student is making, or our child is making continual errors or not doing the homework, then we need to apply more pressure. But we end up lecturing them. You know, if you do your homework, you'll get an A, you'll feel better about yourself. And we're doing this lecturing, and the kid does this little nodding and listening, but not really listening. In the back of my car, Barbie, I have one of these little dogs with the ceramic heads that just bobs up and down.
Right.
And that's what these kids do. They're like, and it's really interesting. Sometimes a parent, usually a father, I'm going to pick on men because we're much worse lecturers than women, I think. Usually a father will lecture a child, and I'll see the child's eyes gloss over, and he's just gone. And the dad, after the end of his lecture, I'll turn to the kid and says, "Hey, Cooper, what did your dad just say?" And they'll look at me and go, "I don't know."
Right.
But the dad felt so good at lecturing and felt it was so brilliant. And I've done the same. I've done the exact same, where I've just talked too much. But we think somehow our wonderful, valuable experience, our wisdom, that is, can be transferred, and that's not how it happens. And so we've got to give children many more opportunities to experience their own pitfalls, to experience their trials and tribulations, and learn by that, and that is the best. And we're there to help them if they really, really need it, or if they're asking for help, or if they're stuck and they continue doing the same problem, then we're there. But we enable children and adolescents way too much, and it's usually by that talking. And also, what that does is it hurts the relationship. You know, kids don't like to hear us lecture.
Right.
So, going back, it's not our lecturing or our wonderful wisdom that we try to impart on them, but allowing kids to fall and fail and then succeed. That experience is by far a very powerful learning tool and very effective. And we get in the way of that as parents. So that's the first myth or problem or pitfall or rule for parenting.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to when I was a kid and some of the things that worked and didn't work. And I have to tell you, I think the lecturing was one of those, you do sit through it with the eyes glossed over, and it isn't as helpful as actually getting out there and making a mistake on your own and learning from it. So I would agree with you on that. Now,
Right.
the second one that you talked about with me is overscheduling. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Sure. Um, this has been more of a problem the last, I'd say 20 years that I've been doing therapy. I've noticed this. When you and I were growing up, we would, after school, we'd go out and ride our bikes, go down to the local elementary school, play basketball, play a tag, go to someone's house, mess around. There'd be unstructured time.
Right.
Now we have sports because we're worried about two things. We're worried about safety. We're worried that if kids are out there, they'll be kidnapped, which is probably no more chance of kidnapping now than there was when we were growing up. And second, the parents often think that if they're in an organized sport, it's going to teach them something, it's going to give them a skill, and it's going to give them a little heads up, or a little edge, that is, and getting into a good college or a good university, which is going to give them an edge on being happy in life because they'll make more money. But we look at sports as being some kind of boost or edge. And the problem is, anytime a parent tells me that their child is in select anything, select soccer, select baseball, select hockey, I start to worry. There is huge pressure. There's overscheduling.
Now we don't have a select out here. I'm not familiar with that. So for anybody else who
Select
might not be
means
familiar.
it's a little bit higher. It's not just the normal kids. It's you have to be invited and work and try out for select. It's like the major leagues. Select is when the major leagues of the extracurriculars here in the South.
Okay. So
They
in
like
my
soccer.
area, it's traveling. They call it
You have to
traveling teams.
exactly. You have to apply. You have to be. You almost scouted for it, and they'll ask you to try out, or you'll try out for it. And if you're good enough, you get it.
Gotcha. Okay.
But the problem is, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of their evening time. Now, you're thinking, isn't it fun and running around and fresh air and that good? Yes and no. And here's the no part. Um, we live on a basis of work and play. We work, and we have to have some play. If we play too much, we get bored and we get lazy, and it's not good. But if we work too much, we get burned out. And you
Right.
know that you've been burned out in your life. I've been burned out because we've worked too much. So play helps us diffuse our work, and it sort of helps us get that balance. And we need to have work and play. Well, so do children.
Okay.
Now, children's work is at school for 7 hours. They're at school working, working, working. And when they come home and play, soccer or whatever, that's play. It's great. That's their play. However, what happens is you convert that play to work when you put an adult in there and call him coach. There's
Okay.
no longer play.
Right.
That
That
now
makes sense.
becomes another form of work, and kids burn out. And so that is no longer fun for them because you have coaches yelling at them. There's too much structure. They're not playing the game by themselves and figuring things out themselves. They have this adult in there, and they get burned out. And we have what's called now culturally induced ADHD, which means that due to our fast-paced culture, we have kids that are looking ADHD when they're not really truly ADHD. In other words, if you pull back all the media, if you pull back all the sports and everything else and let them rest, all that inattention and poor frustration tolerance goes away and it resets.
Really? That's interesting.
So the problem with overscheduling is we're really not doing the kids a service. We're not helping them learn how to get along with others or learn a skill and going to get them a scholarship in college. The chances of your child being a David Beckham in soccer or A-Rod for baseball are just rare.
Okay.
And if that does happen, yes, I understand, but they're mostly rare. But it's what we tend to do more so. There's a better chance of you burning your child out as opposed to preparing them for the major leagues.
Okay.
That's
All right.
what
That makes sense.
overscheduling does.
Now, a question for you on this topic. If your child wants to go out and play a pickup game of basketball, is that a different type of play then? Because there isn't a coach there and it's not structured?
That's a great question. That is the best type of play.
Okay.
When there are a bunch of kids coming up with their own rules and arguing about if you're without a foul or not, that is perfect. But there should be just kids, no adults. Or if the adults are there, they're just to make sure the kids are safe, but they're not intervening.
Okay, I gotcha. That makes sense. All right, now let's talk about another kind of play. A lot of kids now have technology. They're texting, they're playing their Game Boys, and they're doing their PlayStations and Wii's and that type of thing. How do you feel about electronics?
Well, you and I have talked about this before also, but this is something that's very important. One of the bigger problems I'm seeing with parenting these days, and again, we came up with these five, is that they often let electronic rule these kids' lives. Um,
Right.
they're addictive. Some of these electronics, these games, these video games are really addictive, and we're seeing actually the same type of addiction as we do with drugs and alcohol with video games.
Okay.
And it rules their life, and the research is showing that it causes worse frustration tolerance, that they have a shorter and less frustration tolerance, and worse socialization. Now, kids will tell you it helps them, they love it, and some parents will say things like, but when he's playing it, he calms them down. Well, temporarily, but when you get them off of it, they're more agitated, and it's not good.
Yeah.
And what happens is they start yelling at parents, they start yelling at other kids, their siblings, and electronics start to rule these kids' lives. I mean, how many times have you gone out to dinner and seen a family of four all sitting around the table with their iPhones? They're not interacting.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's
And
no
kids are playing.
socialization. Right.
Kids can't come into my office with, they can't. They're sitting in the waiting room for about a couple minutes before I go out there and get them, and the family, and they're playing on the iPhone. They're playing on the iPad. They can't sit there and look at the Where's Waldo book or play with the Legos out there. They want to play electronics, and it's like it dominates, and it should not dominate, and it
Right.
becomes more important.
But it's you could see where a parent would be confused if you're saying that they need to be playing more, that would fall into the play category because it's unstructured. But yet you're saying that it's just too much stimulation.
It's the wrong kind of play.
Okay.
It's the wrong kind of play. The best kind of play is playing with another person.
Okay.
And fantasy games. Okay, we're playing tag, we're playing Star Wars, we're playing that for the younger kids. Um,
Right.
the older kids, when they're building something together, those are great things. Or walking around and playing baseball or basketball or a pickup football game. Those are wonderful things to play, and those are much better for your brain development than the video games. We know that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I remember my son used to play video games and he would get so frustrated with the game. I kept telling him, if it's not fun, stop playing it. It's not, there's nobody's forcing you to do it, you know.
Well, these kids act like this is the most important thing, and I tell kids, I've read the research for the last 35 plus years, and I can tell you, there's not one incident of a child dying from not playing video games. But they'll act like you're going to die if you take it away from me. It's going to make me angrier. This is all my friends are doing it. I won't know what we're talking about. This is, really
Right.
important. I'm going, oh, stop it. You'll live.
All right, talk to me about the phrase that you put together. Rules without relationship equals rebellion. What do you mean by that?
Okay, well, first of all, I wish I did put that together. I plagiarize everything, so that's not mine. This is an old phrase. This is an old saying. This is what my practice is based on, and this is how I do therapy. You have to look at what are the rules and what are the structure in the family, and what's the relationship like. Now, by far, the relationships are more important. But if you have rules and no relationship, you're going to get rebellion. When you just tell a kid you're going to do this and that, and here's what's going on, but there's no relationship. They don't feel any warmth from you. They don't feel any kinship or connectedness. The term is called connectedness to you. They're going to rebel. And also, it goes the other way around. Relationship without rules equals rebellion. You need both.
Okay.
And often when I look at a family, when they come into my office, when a kid comes in and they're telling me what the issues are, the first thing I'm assessing is how strong are the rules, how tight and how good are the rules, and how good is the relationship. Sometimes both of them are out of whack,
Right.
and I try to repair both.
Okay.
But this is what the biggest problem is. Usually tends to be the relationship, because we're in such a fast-paced society. We tend to bark orders, get up, let's move, come on, we got to go to school, let's get your breakfast, eat it now. But there's no relationship. Here's how you want to look at it. Look at it as a bank, Barbie. And like every positive interaction you have with somebody is $1 into the bank. Okay,
Right.
that's the dollar. It doesn't have to be big positive. It doesn't have to be someone taking you out to dinner. That might be 20. That might be like $25. It could be like someone just saying, "Hey, I like your hair," or laughing at a joke of yours, or just smiling and
Right.
walking with you. These are dollars in the bank. Every doesn't even have to be criticism. Every command, task you give a person, that's $5 to $10 out of the bank.
Okay.
Okay, go get dressed. There's $10 out. Put your shoes on. There's $20. It says, I'm not going to tell you again. Put your shoes on. There's another $10.
Right.
And you see what happens is if we only had $6, $7 to begin with in the bank, and then we're taking $40 out in the morning, we're going to be in a deficit spending situation. And so
Sure.
kids will rebel. And that's what they rebel. It's like, hey, this is no fun being around you. I'm not going to want to be around you. So I'm always telling parents rules without relationship equals rebellion. Very, very important. And we'll talk about that more in other interviews because that one is just key to getting a happy family.
Right, exactly. And it's more than just sitting around in the same room together. It's actually interacting together. You're talking about comments and conversations and interaction between the parent and the child.
Right, right, right. Exactly. That's an important one.
Okay. All right. Now, the last one you have here is behavior change is the result of the two components, and it's skills and motivation,
Okay.
not just skills. So let's
Right.
talk about that.
Right. This is a very, very common misperception by parents, teachers, and actually other therapists. I have to admit, therapists often make this mistake. We think if we want behavior change, we need to give them skills. If a child doesn't have any friends, we put them in social skill group. If they are not behaving, we want to explain why they should behave, why they should do their homework. We do explaining. Now, every time we explain, reason, defend, what we're trying to do is give them knowledge or skills. Right. Psychology and therapy early on used to be insight-oriented therapy, and that is insight is a skill. But the understanding that if you understand why you're doing something, you'll change your behavior. I mean, what we found out is with all the insight, all the information, all the skills, people didn't change. They might understand why they're so neurotic,
Right.
why they're so upset, why they're so obsessive, or why they're this or that, but they don't change. Woody Allen, one of my favorite performers, he's been a known neurotic and has been in therapy for 30 years. He says, I'm going to give it another 10 years. If it doesn't work, I'm quitting. Like, okay, I mean, really, do you need another 10 years? So what we think is if we give them skills, they'll do it. And what we miss is that that's not enough. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say I want you to rebuild the carburetor in your car, or you want to rebuild the carburetor in your car, either one. Now, if I want you to rebuild it, and I sit there and go, look, Barbie, here's a carburetor, here's where you're going to find it, here's all the stuff, and you might sit there and go, oh, this is so boring. Now, you might have the skills. You might have to sit in an 8-hour lecture by me listening to this stuff.
Okay.
Are you going to go change and rebuild your carburetor? Probably not, because
it's not interesting.
Thank you. Not interesting, not motivated. Exactly.
Right.
So, but now the other way is, let's say you want to go rebuild a carburetor, and you're not really sure where it is or what's going on, but you'd like to do it, but you don't know how to do it. And you go into your hood and you pull out something, and you take it to a shop and you try to patch this and put new gaskets in it. Well, it might be the starter, not the carburetor, and you might mess it up. And so you might, just motivation alone is not going to do it either.
Right. Exactly. Now, how do you get a child motivated, though?
Funny you should ask that. So, so what we need is motivation plus skills. You can't just give skills. You can't just say, here are the social skills, but here's what you need to do. Here are the words you need to do. You have to motivate them to do that. Now, this is what these whole series of lectures and workshops, lectures and interviews are all about, Barbie. This is about consequences. Consequences motivate. Positive ending, not just negative, not just punishment.
Right.
Positive too. Now, the positive consequence, the best positive consequence is a relationship. That's where we go back to number 4, which is rules without relationship is rebellion. Let's go back to this. Let's go back to that one more because it answers your question. There's probably someone in your life, in your past, that you love, that you adore. It could have been a grandmother, an aunt, or a teacher, an uncle, or a cousin, or somebody.
Okay.
You behaved beautifully around them, and they brought out the best in you, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I can think of some bosses like that.
Exactly. And some bosses, but it's not that they paid you every time you're around them. You
No.
wanted to
Right.
because of the relationship.
Right.
We're
Exactly.
motivated, and with the bosses, you gave your best performance with them, didn't you?
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
Total 100% relationship. Do you see what a positive consequence relationships are?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect
And
sense.
we don't spend enough time building them. And so one motivator is negative motivator, like punishment. Okay, if you don't do your homework, Barbie, you're gonna not be able to go out on the weekend. You're gonna be grounded, et cetera, et cetera. Those are negative. But the best motivators are the positive ones, the relationship, not just toys and and trinkets and external things like you get more time on the computer, but more like I'm proud of you and you feel good. That's that relationship,
Right.
and it's
Right.
key. And so going back to that number, that biggest problem we have in parenting is behavior change. If you want to see a kid change his behavior, you can't just tell him what to do. He's got to be motivated, either positively or negatively motivated to change.
All right. So let's just say hypothetically that you have a child who you've been having there's been discord for a while and you're not their favorite person. Then the relationship at that point is not naturally intrinsically a good relationship. And if you're using relationship as one of the big motivators, how do you turn it around then?
Well, first of all, you have to work on getting a better relationship. You don't sit there and try to enforce a rule without a good relationship. Those are building relationships are things like using the acknowledgments or a good behavior game, which is also on my website.
Right.
Um, or the golden touch. These are all relationship builders, stuff
Okay.
like that. Again, even being in the same room watching a movie with someone, just going and doing errands, but not criticizing or critiquing or lecturing, and keeping it just hanging out in the same space will start building a relationship. Relationships are very easy. What we do is we start tearing them down by giving little tasks, giving little hints, giving little what we think are constructive comments.
Right.
Uh,
Exactly.
Remember,
Yeah.
they take money out of the bank, everything. So again, if you're finding a big problem and you're not able to set a rule, you're not going to set it by getting harsher. They're just going to get revenge and they're just going to get sneakier. You better
Okay.
start working and focusing on that relationship
That
first.
makes perfect sense. That you know what, everything that you've said today has been absolutely enlightening and clarifies a lot of things that I think a lot of parents are going through, and a lot of problems that we seem to have across the board. So thank you for sharing the 5 parenting tools.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Now, here's you have so much information on your website, and so many of these can be downloaded. Can you tell everybody how to get in contact with you? How do we reach your website, and how do we get in contact with you if we're in the Dallas area and want to make an appointment with you?
The best way to get in touch is really through my website, which is www.drraylevy.com, DRRAYLEVY.com. Should be at the bottom of the screen.
Okay,
And there's things you can download, pages you can go to get information, and also my phone number. There's a lot of information on my website. If you're in the Dallas area and you want to make an appointment, you can call 972-407-1191. That's 972-407-1191. And my secretary can help schedule an appointment.
perfect, awesome. Well, I am quite sure that you're going to get a lot of folks that are checking in on the website. And if you have not seen Dr. Ray's website, I would strongly encourage that you take a moment, go out there, www.drraylevy.com, and get some information out there. He's got a lot of downloads and a lot of things that you could look at, a lot of tools and tips, and I think that that'll be helpful to any parent who's challenged with parenting. Thank you very much, Dr. Levy, for joining us today and for joining us on Happiness TV. And have a wonderful day. Thanks for coming.